It was a crisp autumn morning in early October 2023 when Helen Morris stepped out onto the porch of her small cottage nestled on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. The leaves were turning fiery shades of orange and red, the air cool but invigorating. Helen was 67 years old, and by many accounts she should have been slowing down. After all, she had retired 3 years earlier and had lived through decades of societal messages telling her that after 60, life was meant to wind down, to take it easy, to rest and relax. But Helen was about to prove that narrative dead wrong. For years, Helen had been hearing people around her talk about getting old, about how energy wanes, how ambition fades, and how the best days are behind you. Family gatherings, casual conversations, even the news media seemed to echo this sentiment. Once you hit 60, you slow down. Her own daughter had recently expressed worry, suggesting Helen should take it easier, avoid too much strain, and enjoy her golden years. But Helen wasn't buying it. That morning, as she tied her running shoes, she thought back to her youth, when she was a competitive runner in college. She remembered the thrill of pushing her body, the rush of accomplishment after a tough race, and the sense of invincibility that came with youth and health. She knew deep down that while her body had changed, her spirit had not. That day, Helen went out for a run. Not a slow walk or an easy stroll, but a deliberate, steady jog through the winding mountain roads that surrounded her home. Her neighbors watched in surprise. At her age, running like that? They whispered. Helen smiled quietly to herself. What they didn't know was that Helen had spent the past 5 years dedicating herself to a different kind of training. One focused on maintaining strength, flexibility, and mental sharpness. She'd consulted with doctors, nutritionists, and fitness experts, learning how to adapt her routines to meet the changing needs of her body. She wasn't trying to compete with 20-year-olds. She was rewriting the rules of aging on her own terms. But Helen's journey wasn't just about physical fitness. It was about mindset. A few weeks before, she had attended a community seminar in Asheville titled Ageless Ambition, Thriving Beyond 60. The event brought together a diverse group of people, scientists, motivational speakers, and everyday individuals who refused to accept the limits society placed on older adults. The keynote speaker, Dr. Michael Lewis, a gerontologist from Duke University, shared groundbreaking research revealing how neuroplasticity and muscle regeneration are possible well into the 70s and beyond with the right lifestyle choices. Hearing those words ignited a spark in Helen. She realized that the slowing down everyone assumed was inevitable wasn't a law of nature but a myth born from outdated thinking. After the seminar, Helen connected with several other attendees who were also determined to challenge the stereotype of aging. They formed a weekly group called the Unstoppables, a mix of retirees and seniors who committed to pushing their limits, whether through hiking, learning new skills, or volunteering in ways that kept their minds and bodies engaged. Helen became a leader in the group, organizing hikes up the Blue Ridge Mountains, coordinating workshops on healthy cooking, and even starting a book club that focused on biographies of people who achieved great things late in life. Word of the Unstoppables began to spread through Asheville, inspiring more people over 60 to join. Local media caught wind of the movement, and soon Helen was invited to speak on a regional radio show. When asked about her secret to staying so vibrant, Helen's answer was simple. I refuse to let age define what I can or cannot do. It's about mindset, consistency, and surrounding yourself with people who believe in your potential. But the story didn't end there. One chilly November morning, Helen received a call from an old friend, Mark, who she hadn't seen in over 30 years. Mark was now a renowned marathon coach in Boston, and he had heard about Helen's story. He invited her to participate in a charity marathon for seniors, a special event designed to raise awareness about active aging. Helen was thrilled but nervous. She hadn't run a full marathon in decades. Yet, the idea of crossing that finish line, not just for herself but for every person who'd been told they're too old to pursue their dreams, gave her purpose. Training began in earnest. Helen pushed through days of fatigue, soreness, and doubt. But each time those feelings crept in, she reminded herself that the real race was against outdated ideas about aging. On the day of the marathon in Boston, Helen stood at the starting line alongside hundreds of other runners, many of whom were also over 60. The air buzzed with excitement and determination. As the race began, Helen felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Halfway through the race, her legs ached and the cold wind bit at her cheeks. But every step was fueled by the faces of those who believed she could do this. Her daughter, who now cheered loudly from the sidelines, the friends from the Unstoppables, and the countless others watching around the world who found inspiration in her journey. Crossing the finish line, Helen felt a surge of emotions: pride, joy, and an unshakable conviction that the narrative society told about aging was wrong. She was far from slowing down. She was just getting started. In the months that followed, Helen's story became a beacon for many. She was invited to speak at universities, senior centers, and conferences, always reminding her audience that their potential does not diminish with age. It only requires the courage to defy expectations and the commitment to keep moving forward. Helen's journey shows us that age is just a number, and the limits we face are often the ones we accept. The truth is, you're not slowing down, they're just wrong about you. And this story is far from over. Helen is already planning her next adventure, learning to sail, something she'd always dreamed of but never tried before. Because the real secret to thriving after 60 isn't about maintaining youth. It's about embracing the endless possibilities that come with every new day. A few weeks after the marathon, Helen received an unexpected message on social media. It was from Carlos Ramirez, a 72-year-old artist living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Carlos had been following the news coverage of the marathon and was deeply moved by Helen's story. He wrote, "I watched your finish with tears in my eyes. You reminded me that it's never too late to chase a dream. I've been painting for decades, but only recently started sharing my work. Your courage has inspired me to organize a local exhibit featuring artists over 60. Would you be interested in collaborating somehow?" Helen was thrilled. Though miles apart, they shared a common mission: to redefine what aging meant by pursuing passion, creativity, and purpose. They started exchanging ideas regularly, inspiring each other with stories of transformation and perseverance. At the same time, back in Asheville, the Unstoppables were gaining momentum. More seniors were joining each week, including James, a former corporate executive who had lost his wife a year earlier and was struggling with loneliness and depression. When James attended his first meeting, he was quiet, reserved, almost invisible in the group. But Helen saw something in him, a flicker of life waiting to be reignited. One day, Helen invited James to join her on a hike through the Pisgah National Forest. The walk was slow and steady, the two of them sharing memories, hopes, and fears along the way. James opened up about his grief and how he'd felt like his best years were behind him. Helen listened carefully and then said, "James, your story isn't over yet. Grief is heavy, but it doesn't have to weigh you down forever. You're here, you're breathing, and you have the power to choose what's next." Inspired by Helen's words, James began to re-engage with life. He started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young professionals and rediscovering joy in connection. The Unstoppables had become more than a fitness group. They were a family helping each other heal and grow. Meanwhile, Helen's sailing lessons began. The local marina had a program for beginners, and Helen was determined to master the basics. On her first day out on the water, she was nervous, fumbling with the ropes and struggling to keep the small sailboat steady. But she refused to give up. With the patient guidance of her instructor, Mia, a sprightly 55-year-old sailor, Helen gradually found her rhythm. Mia shared stories of her own journey, how she'd taken up sailing after surviving a serious illness, how the water had become her sanctuary and source of strength. Their friendship blossomed, and Helen found herself not just learning a new skill, but also discovering a new community. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the lake, Helen sat quietly on the deck, watching the reflection of the sky shimmer on the water. She realized how far she'd come. From hearing that she should slow down and take it easy to running marathons, leading groups, learning to sail, and inspiring others across the country. But Helen also knew that the biggest challenge was yet to come. Her doctor had recently told her she had early signs of osteoarthritis, a condition that could limit her mobility and threaten her active lifestyle. At first, Helen felt a wave of fear. Would this be the end of her journey? Would she have to accept the slow decline everyone expected? But then she remembered the words from Dr. Michael Lewis at the seminar. The body is resilient, and with the right care and mindset, you can adapt and thrive. Helen took a proactive approach. She started physical therapy, worked with a nutritionist to reduce inflammation, and adjusted her exercise routine to include low-impact activities like swimming and yoga. She kept running but listened carefully to her body, never pushing into pain. Through this, Helen became an advocate for aging with grace and strength, not denial or fear. She shared her experience openly with the Unstoppables and online followers, encouraging others facing health challenges to keep moving forward with compassion and determination. James, Carlos, Mia, and Helen, though from different walks of life and spread across the country, were connected by a shared belief. Age does not dictate your value, your dreams, or your impact. Helen's story continues, not as a neat conclusion but as an ongoing journey. A powerful reminder that you are not slowing down. You're just getting started. One of the most remarkable members of the Unstoppables was Grace Thompson, a 71-year-old retired schoolteacher from Asheville. Grace had always been passionate about education, but after retiring, she felt a void in her life. The routine of school years was gone, and she struggled to find purpose. Many friends her age were settling into quiet retirement, but Grace felt restless. One evening, at a meeting of the Unstoppables, Grace shared her feelings. She spoke about her longing to contribute but unsure how. Inspired by Helen's example, Grace decided to start tutoring children in her neighborhood who were struggling with reading and math. She used her skills and decades of experience to create a small but impactful after-school program. Her efforts blossomed quickly. Parents were grateful, and the children began showing improvements not only academically but also in confidence. Grace found joy and fulfillment that reignited her spirit. She often said, "I'm teaching, yes, but I'm learning too, learning that life keeps offering chances, no matter your age." At the same time, across town was Leonard Leo Brooks, a 69-year-old former jazz musician who had put his saxophone aside for over 20 years. Life had taken him through ups and downs, raising a family, changing careers, and dealing with health scares. Music was a distant memory. One day, after attending a motivational talk by Helen and feeling inspired by the Unstoppables, Leo dusted off his saxophone. The first notes were rusty and uncertain, but soon, the music began flowing again. He started performing at local cafes and community events, delighting audiences and rediscovering a vital part of himself. Leo's comeback wasn't just about music. It was about reclaiming identity and joy. His story spread through Asheville's arts community, encouraging other older adults to reconnect with forgotten passions. The Unstoppables even hosted a jazz night, featuring Leo and other local senior musicians, turning a small community center into a lively, vibrant hub. Then there was Sandra, a 65-year-old former software engineer who had faced ageism in the tech industry. Forced into early retirement, Sandra feared she was being written off simply because of her age. But joining the Unstoppables changed her perspective. She realized that her skills were still valuable and began mentoring young women entering tech careers. Sandra also started an online blog sharing her journey, combating stereotypes, tackling imposter syndrome, and advocating for age diversity in the workplace. Her writing resonated widely, making her a sought-after speaker at conferences and workshops. Through Sandra's efforts, the Unstoppables expanded beyond Asheville, inspiring communities in other cities to create similar groups focused on empowerment and lifelong growth. Helen, Grace, Leo, Sandra, and many others in the Unstoppables embodied one truth. Life after 60 is not a decline but a new chapter filled with opportunities for reinvention, connection, and impact. As the group grew, so did their projects, from community gardens and art shows to health fairs and technology training sessions. They weren't just staying active. They were shaping their world, proving every day that age is no barrier to passion or purpose. Their stories intertwined, a tapestry of resilience, hope, and unstoppable energy. Grace Thompson's greatest challenge came when funding for her after-school tutoring program was suddenly cut. The local community center, which had generously provided space and materials, faced budget cuts and could no longer support the initiative. Grace felt the weight of responsibility for the children who relied on her help. The thought of the program ending was devastating, not just for the kids, but for her sense of purpose. For days, Grace wrestled with discouragement. Was she too old to find a solution? Should she accept defeat? But then she remembered the core message she had embraced with the Unstoppables. Resilience and creativity can break through barriers. She reached out to local businesses, parents, and even the town council. Grace organized a community fundraiser, tapping into her extensive network from her teaching days. With the help of volunteers, including members from the Unstoppables, she held a bake sale, a book drive, and a charity concert featuring Leo's jazz band. The community rallied. The event was a huge success, raising enough funds to keep the tutoring program alive for another year. The experience taught Grace that obstacles, no matter how daunting, could be overcome with determination and collective effort. She also realized that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, but strength. Leo Brooks faced a very different challenge: his health. After years of neglecting his well-being, Leo was diagnosed with hypertension and early-stage diabetes. The news shook him deeply, forcing him to confront the lifestyle changes needed to protect his future. At first, the dietary restrictions and exercise regimen felt overwhelming. He worried that managing his health would drain the joy from his music and daily life. But Leo found inspiration from Helen's example, how she balanced her arthritis diagnosis with active living and positive mindset. Leo joined a local support group for seniors managing chronic illnesses. He learned to adapt his daily routine, incorporating gentle stretching, mindful eating, and regular check-ins with his doctor. He even composed a series of songs inspired by his journey, channeling struggles and hope into his art. His music took on new depth, resonating with audiences who recognized their own battles in his melodies. Leo became an advocate for healthy aging, encouraging others to listen to their bodies and seek support without shame. Sandra's challenge was more internal. Despite her professional accomplishments, she struggled with imposter syndrome and self-doubt, feelings that intensified after being sidelined by age discrimination. Speaking out publicly through her blog and talks was empowering, but also terrifying. Each post felt like a vulnerable step into the unknown. One day, Sandra received a harsh comment on her blog, dismissing her views and telling her to accept her place. The words stung, threatening to silence her voice. For a moment, she considered stepping back, retreating into silence. But Sandra remembered the mission she had embraced with the Unstoppables: to break down barriers and support each other's growth. She reached out to her online community, who rallied around her with encouragement and shared stories of their own struggles. This experience strengthened Sandra's resolve. She began collaborating with other advocates to form an online coalition against ageism in tech, creating webinars, mentorship programs, and advocacy campaigns. Her vulnerability became her strength, inspiring many to stand up and demand respect regardless of age. Together, these challenges and responses illustrate the powerful truth Helen and her friends embody. The obstacles we face are not roadblocks but stepping stones. Whether it's loss of resources, health concerns, or internal doubts, the spirit to rise and adapt defines the unstoppable journey. Their stories remind us that it's okay to face hardships and ask for help, and that growth often comes from the hardest trials. A few months after the fundraiser, Grace Thompson stood before a packed room in the local library. Parents, children, volunteers, and community leaders gathered to celebrate the success of her tutoring program. Grace watched as the kids confidently shared their progress, reading aloud, solving math problems, and proudly holding certificates of achievement. Tears welled in Grace's eyes. This was more than education. It was hope renewed. One mother approached Grace afterward, saying, "You've changed my daughter's life. Thank you for believing in her." Grace smiled, feeling a warmth that reminded her why she never gave up. That same evening, Leo Brooks performed at a jazz night hosted by the Unstoppables. The small community center was packed with an audience of all ages, clapping and swaying to his soulful tunes. Between songs, Leo shared his journey of rediscovery and health battles, inspiring others to embrace second chances. After his set, a young musician approached him, saying, "You gave me hope that I can keep playing no matter what age I am." Leo felt a deep satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing his music touched hearts beyond just notes and melodies. Sandra's blog reached a milestone, 100,000 followers. Her coalition against ageism in tech had grown into a respected voice advocating policy changes and workplace training programs. She was invited to speak at a national tech conference, standing on a stage where she once feared she wouldn't be welcome. Looking out at the crowd, Sandra felt the weight of every struggle lifted. This, she thought, is what happens when you refuse to be invisible. The applause was thunderous, affirming her impact. Meanwhile, Helen's sailing skills had blossomed. One sunny spring morning, she captained a small sailboat with Mia and a few Unstoppable's friends on a leisurely cruise across the lake. The wind filled the sails as laughter and stories echoed across the water. Helen looked around at her friends, the people who had become family, and felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was the embodiment of thriving after 60. Adventure, connection, and limitless possibility. During the trip, Helen shared her vision of expanding the Unstoppables to other cities, creating a network of empowered seniors rewriting the story of aging nationwide. Her friends nodded in enthusiastic agreement. Together, they were unstoppable. These moments, small victories, shared celebrations, public recognition, are the fuel that drives their ongoing journey. They remind everyone that setbacks are temporary, but the spirit to rise and inspire endures. Their stories aren't just about individual success. They are a collective anthem for anyone who's been told to slow down or step aside. The truth is clear. The best chapters are still being written. Inspired by the sailing trip, Helen and the Unstoppables began brainstorming ways to expand their mission. Helen envisioned a national movement, an interconnected network of active, passionate seniors supporting each other to redefine what it meant to age. With Sandra's tech skills, they launched a website called Unstoppable Living, designed to connect like-minded seniors across the country. The platform featured forums, local meetup listings, health resources, and inspiring stories like theirs. Within months, thousands joined, creating vibrant online communities sharing workouts, book recommendations, cooking tips, and personal triumphs. Grace spearheaded a volunteer ambassador program to bring tutoring and mentorship to underserved areas nationwide. She coordinated virtual tutoring sessions, enabling retired educators to reach children far beyond their own neighborhoods. Leo and a group of musicians started a traveling jazz and blues tour, performing at senior centers, community festivals, and schools to celebrate intergenerational connection through music. The tour became a joyful way to bring communities together and remind everyone that creativity and passion have no age limit. Meanwhile, Sandra's advocacy efforts gained momentum. She partnered with major companies to develop age-inclusive hiring practices and workplace wellness programs designed specifically for older employees. Her coalition grew into a powerful voice influencing policy and corporate culture. Back in Asheville, Helen continued her sailing lessons, pushing herself to master more challenging maneuvers. She set her sights on participating in a regional regatta next year, a goal that combined her love of adventure with her commitment to living boldly. Each member of the Unstoppables also found personal projects that reflected their evolving passions. Grace began writing a book on education and empowerment for older adults. Leo started teaching music workshops, helping others rekindle their own creative flames. Sandra launched a podcast interviewing seniors breaking barriers in various fields. Together, they planned an annual Unstoppable Summit, a gathering of seniors, experts, and advocates to share ideas, celebrate achievements, and inspire continued growth. The first event, set for the following spring in Asheville, promised to be a powerful testament to the movement they had sparked. Despite the challenges ahead, whether health issues, societal expectations, or personal doubts, they faced them with resilience born of experience and community. Their stories were no longer just about overcoming obstacles. They were about thriving, leading, and creating legacies. Helen often reflected on how far they'd come. From a small group meeting in a community center to a nationwide force, the Unstoppables embodied the truth she had lived by all along. You are not slowing down, they are just wrong about you. The sun was setting over Asheville, casting a warm amber glow through the windows of the small cafe where Helen had invited Grace, Leo, and Sandra for an intimate gathering. The four friends sat around a rustic wooden table, mugs of tea and coffee steaming gently between them. Helen smiled and began, sometimes I think people imagine getting older as just fading away. But for me, it's been the opposite. It's like a second sunrise, a chance to redefine who I am. Grace nodded thoughtfully. I felt lost when I retired. For years, my identity was wrapped up in being a teacher. Suddenly, that was gone. But stepping into tutoring again, this time on my own terms, it reminded me that purpose isn't about a job title. It's about impact. Leo took a slow sip of his coffee before adding, music gave me my youth and my passion. Losing touch with it was like losing a part of my soul. But picking up my sax again, even with all the challenges, taught me that creativity doesn't age. It evolves. Sandra leaned forward, eyes bright with conviction. And for me, confronting ageism in tech was terrifying at first. I worried I'd be dismissed or ignored. But sharing my story, connecting with others, it showed me that vulnerability can be a superpower. Helen smiled, feeling the circle of strength and understanding between them. We've all faced doubts and fears. Maybe the biggest lesson is this: aging isn't a limitation. It's an invitation to keep learning, to keep dreaming, to keep giving. Grace laughed softly. I love that. Aging as an invitation. It makes you think differently about the years ahead. Leo grinned. And it's true. Every wrinkle, every gray hair, they're badges of the battles we've won and the stories we carry. Sandra's voice softened. I want people to know that purpose doesn't disappear when your career changes or your body changes. It just shifts shape, like water finding new paths. Helen raised her cup. To purpose, to friendship, to being unstoppable no matter our age. The others lifted their mugs, clinking them gently together. Outside, the twilight deepened, but inside, the warmth of their shared journey illuminated the room. The months leading up to the first Unstoppable Summit were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Helen, Grace, Leo, Sandra, and the growing network of Unstoppables poured their hearts into planning an event that would celebrate life beyond conventional limits and inspire thousands to embrace their fullest selves at every age. The small conference hall in Asheville buzzed with anticipation on the morning of the summit. Banners bearing the Unstoppables emblem, an unbroken circle symbolizing infinite possibility, hung proudly from the walls. Volunteers bustled about, setting up booths offering health screenings, creative workshops, tech tutorials, and more. The air was filled with the mingled scents of fresh coffee, blooming flowers, and the palpable energy of hope and renewal. Helen stood near the entrance, greeting arrivals with a radiant smile. She reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from her first hesitant steps into a running club, to the friendships forged and challenges overcome, to this moment when their collective dream was becoming reality. Grace was busy coordinating a panel discussion on intergenerational mentorship, her voice calm yet passionate as she directed speakers and attendees alike. Watching the young and old share stories and laughter, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, proof that purpose and connection could bridge any divide. Leo tuned his saxophone backstage, nerves and excitement mingling in his chest. He knew this performance was more than just music. It was a declaration that creativity and passion defied time. As the first notes floated through the hall, the audience was captivated, their applause a thunderous affirmation of his journey back to the stage. Sandra stood at a tech workshop, helping seniors navigate new software with patience and encouragement. She smiled warmly as an elderly woman mastered her first video call, knowing these moments of empowerment rippled far beyond the room. Throughout the day, stories unfolded, tales of reinvention, resilience, and rediscovery. Each speaker, each participant, carried the spirit of the Unstoppables, a refusal to be defined or limited by age. At the summit's close, Helen took the stage to address the crowd. Her voice was steady and filled with gratitude. We are here today because we chose to believe in possibility, because we refused to accept that age is a barrier, because we know that every day is a chance to grow, to love, to create, and to inspire. This is just the beginning. Our journey, our movement will continue to spread, connecting hearts and minds across cities, states, and countries. Together, we will rewrite the story of aging, showing the world that life after 60, 70, 80, and beyond is rich with opportunity, joy, and meaning. So to everyone here and everyone watching and listening, know this: you are not slowing down. You are just getting started. And we are unstoppable. The room erupted in cheers and applause, the energy electrifying and affirming. Helen stepped back, eyes shining, surrounded by friends who had become family. They had faced doubts, health struggles, societal expectations, and moments of fear. But together, they had built something powerful and lasting. As the crowd dispersed, conversations lingered, connections deepened, and plans for future gatherings and projects took root. The Unstoppables were no longer just a group. They were a movement, a beacon of hope and proof that the best chapters of life are written not despite age, but because of the wisdom, courage, and heart it brings. And so their story continues, not with an end, but with an open horizon filled with promise. They were and always would be unstoppable,